If you want to be a PJ, combat controller, or special reconnaissance airman, you'll need to make it through 4 grueling weeks at Air Force assessment and selection. Recent times have seen a complete overhaul of the Air Force Special Warfare training pipeline, and the creation of a new enlisted Special Warfare contract. As a coach training civilians and military personnel for soft careers, I've seen firsthand many candidates now considering or shifting their plans to pursue careers in the Air Force. But all of these changes to the pipeline and career fields have left many questioning just how difficult is this new pipeline and to what extent they should adjust their training. The previously named Physical Ability and Stamina Test has been updated and is now called the Initial Fitness Test. You need to pass it to earn a contract, and there's now one set of minimum standards for PJ, CCT, and Special Reconnaissance candidates. 8 pull-ups, 50 sit-ups, 40 push-ups, a 10-20 1.5-mile run, 2 25-meter underwaters, and a 15-minute 500-meter swim are the minimum standards. Now, with this change to one standard, there was also a change to the contracting system. All civilians seeking an active duty enlistment will sign the same Special Warfare Operator Enlistment Vectoring contract. What that means is you no longer guarantee your career field. Instead, you have a guaranteed shot at assessment and selection, but your career path, whether it's PJ, CCT, or SR, will be chosen for you based on your performance, preferences, and the needs of the Air Force. The only exception to this is that National Guard and Reserve units operate differently and run their own selection processes prior to sending candidates to basic and then assessment and selection. Prior to the overhaul of the pipeline, there was a 9-week course for pararescue candidates called INDOC. There, the attrition rate hovered between 80 and 90%, and the respective courses for combat controllers, TACPs, and SAUTs, who are now called Special Recon, also had very high attrition rates. Throughout these years, you can see a higher percentage of candidates were dropped from the 9-week INDOC course than those in 6 months of BUDS. One rebuttal to these high attrition rates is that PJ candidates during these years were slower, weaker, and less fit, but the data doesn't show that. The average PJ candidate had a 1.5-mile runtime under 9 minutes and 30 seconds, putting them in line or faster than many other career fields. Additionally, this data from the RAND Corporation shows the top 25% of PJ recruits, notably before the contracting system changed, clocked a 9-minute 1.5-mile run and an impressive 8:11 500-meter swim. But even with those numbers, that candidate would only have a 15% chance of getting selected. And for those landing in the top 5% of their class with an 8:31 run and 7:12 swim, their odds of getting selected were still only 38%. But how much has changed since the retirement of INDOC and the creation of the 8-week Air Force prep course and the 4-week assessment and selection? Well, a lot has changed. Rewind 2 years back when the Air Force found its attrition rates were too high and they weren't producing operators fast enough, so they commissioned the RAND Corporation to do a deep dive on the pipeline and make recommendations on how to improve. One of those recommendations was to increase the physical preparedness of candidates after basic training, since candidates were detraining during those weeks. Today, the 8-week prep course is immediately following basic, so you'll rebuild your fitness and prepare for the demands of selection. At the prep course, candidates are split into groups based on fitness benchmarks, have a regimented schedule, and are taught by elite performance coaches on every aspect of physical fitness, from running, rucking, mobility, water confidence, strength, swimming, and more. I'll have a special note on water confidence at the end when I talk about the overlooked aspects of fitness, since it was found there was a specific gap in candidate readiness. Now, one other aspect of the prep school you may have seen or heard of is photos of ice baths, float tanks, and other technology the Air Force has budgeted to improve their candidates' recovery and performance. While we don't have detailed data on recent attrition rates like we do for BUDS or SFAS, since the pipeline changed, there was some interesting data revealed in the last year. Specifically, of the 1,337 candidates who attempted ANS since 2018, 77% were included in this research. The data shows half of all candidates were selected at ANS on their first attempt, 31% self-eliminated, 12% were medically dropped, and just over 5% were removed for performance. This indicates a significant increase in the percentage of candidates getting selected, but it doesn't mean the pipeline is getting easier. Air Force candidates continue to be very fit, and if anything, this data points to the fact that a higher percentage of attrition could be happening in the prep course, since it's 8 weeks long. And you'll see that the physical performance of even the average Air Air Force candidate is very high. We'll get to the detailed data on that in a minute. First, let's talk about the age, body composition, and anthropometrics of candidates. ANS trainees ranged in age from 18 years old at the youngest to 39 and a half at the oldest, with the average candidate being 23. In terms of stature, the average candidate was 5'10" tall and weighed 173 pounds, and their body fat percentage was just under 12% on an in-body body composition analyzer. Now at the low end, a candidate was 5'2" tall, and the tallest candidate was 6'5". The data collected shows body weights as low as 120 pounds and all the way as high as 234 pounds. Unfortunately, we don't have detailed data showing what correlates with ANS success. We just have the mean, minimum, maximum, and standard deviations of these metrics. But if the data from BUDS and Special Forces Assessment and Selection are any indication, it would follow that leaner, more muscular, bigger candidates tend to perform better. What we do have access to is candidate performance on the initial and candidate fitness tests. On the IFT, the average trainee completed 67 sit-ups, 57 push-ups, swam a 10:13 500-meter swim, and ran a 9:36 1.5-mile run, which is about in line with previous year's performance. One interesting development was the creation of the Operator Fitness Test, which is designed to measure physical readiness of operators who are currently serving. This same test was administered to candidates and is called the Candidate Fitness Test. It's completed in full combat uniform and boots and includes a 3-mile ruck with 60 pounds, a standing long jump, pro agility drills, a 3-rep max deadlift, pull-ups, farmer carries, shuttle run, and then a 1,500-meter swim with fins. What I find interesting from the candidate data is they performed really well. The average candidate deadlifted 343 pounds for 3 reps and completed 15 pull-ups. And keep in mind, these were not done fresh. The deadlift followed the ruck, long jump, and agility drills, and the pull-ups followed the deadlift. What's also noteworthy is candidates didn't receive additional points for going beyond 15 pull-ups or 350 pounds on the deadlift, which may indicate that these numbers are artificially low. However, you can see some candidates did go to max effort, with the strongest candidate performing 34 pull-ups and hitting 405 pounds for 3 reps on the deadlift. If you're curious what numbers would put you in the top quarter or 5% of the class, check out these numbers. Now that we've gone over historic attrition rates and physical performance, let's talk about the 2 most overlooked aspects of preparation based on this data. First is basic water skills. At ANS, a major driver of attrition is water confidence. And while you can have a stellar 500-yard freestyle swim, that means nothing if you fail to complete your treads, buddy breathing, or underwaters. And this is not just anecdotal. The data shows this as well. While the past test did predict who would and would not be selected in previous years, once a basic water test was added, including a timed tread, buddy breathing, and underwaters, researchers were able to better predict whether a candidate would or would not be selected. So make sure you're doing your water confidence. Second is avoiding injury. Nearly half of all candidates who attempted assessment and selection ended up with some type of musculoskeletal injury, and when we look at the location of those injuries, they are most common in the legs, indicating some type of shin splint or knee issue. Now, it doesn't take research to tell you that if you have an injury today and attempt selection tomorrow, that injury is going to resurface if you didn't do the necessary rehab and strengthening work. And that's exactly what the research found. Older candidates, slower candidates, and those with a history of injury were most likely to get injured. So make sure that you rehabilitate any injuries you have and get them back to 100%. Then, slowly increase your training volume over time and exceed the standards to give yourself the best chance of staying healthy. Of course, I'd also recommend that you do strength training, like the workouts in this beginner routine, twice per week. The full program details are available for free in the description. And after you've trained on the beginner routine for a few months, then you can move on to the intermediate and advanced routine, which has higher training volume. If you have any questions about training, leave them in the comments. And if you're interested in learning about how hard Army Special Forces or Navy SEAL training is, check out the videos on the screen.